Welcome everybody. And we got Unmesh Pawar. Unmesh is an investor, mentor, and advisor at KPMG with over 2 decades of international experience in building a high performance leadership teams. And he's one of the sought after leaders in human resources space. Till recently, he was a CHRO for KPMG's entities in India. And prior to that, he was a global managing director, human resources at Accenture. Unmesh is also moderating the conversation today. So Unmesh, welcome. We got Vidya Basarkot. Vidya is a director at Rambol Engineering Center and country manager with over 3 decades of professional experience. And prior to this, she had held leadership positions at JP's and Reliance Infrastructure. And I have worked very closely with Vidya when she was at JP, and I've seen her involvement in the space of working with people, and especially her concern towards the people at the lowest bracket of the spectrum. So I'm sure we're going to have some good inputs from Vidya today on this subject. We got Shailendra Khanna. Shailendra is head of customer experience, learning and development and product at SpiceJet, and a very dynamic professional with over 2 decades of experience in managing a wide range of learning and development strategies. He's worked with Jet Airways, Indigo, American Express, Spice. Probably all the organizations are known for their customer experiences. And Shailendra has been at the forefront in churning out the strategies for people and customer experiences. And besides this, he also works in his farmhouse and looks after his peacocks. So Shailendra, welcome. We got Darpan Vashisht. Darpan is the group CFO for Hero Cycles, a seasoned finance professional, and he's worked prior with AAK, Biba, and PepsiCo. And probably he's worked on every spectrum of the value chain that you can think about. And I think his views today would be extremely helpful because he really works with that spectrum of people who belong to that category which we're talking today. So it would be very, very interesting to hear from Darpan on this front. Then we got Rajendra Gag. Rajendra is the CHRO for Blue Dart, and with over 3 decades of experience in the field of HR today, he's a voice when it comes to HR policies and transformation. And he's worked with Sandoz, DHL, Cadbury's, Reliance Industries, and HDFC Life. He's also certified change management trainer and considers people management as his forte. And he's also ranked as one of the 100 most influential HR professionals in Asia. So Unmesh, I'll hand this over to you, and I'll probably take the best seat to hear and learn from you all that what could be the better approaches, new models, strategies than we had in the past, ones that deliver and bring about large-scale change and empowerment. So Unmesh.
Thank you very much, Deepak, and good morning, everybody. And thank you, CEO Lounge, for pulling us together. And I think it's a very pertinent topic, and especially so on a Saturday morning. Somebody who's right now spending garden time waking up to this, I think it's really something that I wanted to be looking forward to yesterday. So one thing that really, if you look at where we are currently from a pandemic standpoint, at least the good news is that at least your metros are starting to trend below the 10%, at least the big ones, which shows that there is some hope that in a couple of months there would be a revival like we experienced potentially somewhere towards September, October last year. But I think I really want to go back to a point in time and really spend some time talking about, and I think a data point that jumped up to me, I think a couple of days ago, I think some of you may have caught it, even Bangladesh supposedly is going to have better GDP numbers than we are. And that was like just a hit somewhere that I couldn't digest, right? Because that's a country that we've been helping with. That's a country that potentially we helped free them. And look how they have been able to progress. And in spite of all the press around them, except for the last 1 year being as negative as it's been, it's impressive of what they've been able to do. But I think I really want to try and peel the onions of a bit, right? I mean, despite what the rise of corporate India has been and our industries, our post-liberation, liberalization story, etc. why do we feel that the workforce at the lower end is so economically vulnerable? And what are some of the potential reasons that we can point out some of this? So I don't know. I would potentially want to go first to Kalpan. You want to open that first for us?
You're on mute.
You're on mute, Kalpan.
Yes, yes, just a sec. So, very interesting. When we talked about Bangladesh, I was fortunate enough to live in Bangladesh for 2 years, when I was working with Pepsi. And, one small point, and then I'll come around to, the larger point is that if you talk about Bangladesh per se, I think what Bangladesh did well was they were able to find intersections of, multipliers of disempowerment. Uh, it didn't happen planfully. And let me explain what I'm saying. It didn't happen planfully. It just happened. So you would know that Bangladesh has been and continues to be the second largest exporter of ready-made garments, aside of China. And more than 80%, and some estimates are that almost 90% of the workforce over there in ready-made garments is women. Now, intuitively, women in Southeast Asian countries with the kind of orthodoxy, etc., multiplied with poverty would be one of the most disenfranchised lot. But I think that, when you find those intersections and when you are able to, pull levers around those, the beneficial impact, the virtuous cycle that you kick off also is slightly more broad, more broad based. I think one of the reasons why Bangladesh has been consistently, delivering a 6% plus GDP over the last 12 or 15 years is because of it's again a country which is, in terms of regulations, etc., slightly behind of curve compared to India. I mean, if I were to say. Having said that, what they may not have in terms of regulations, they make it up for it in terms of kind of social interventions and the kind of poverty elevation intervention that they have done. BRAC, again a Bangladeshi organization, it is one of the largest NGOs world over. There are a humongous number of 65,000 schools. I mean, 65,000 schools is not something to be scoffed at. I'm not talking about the scale and size, but 65,000 schools there are. Microfinance, the popularity of microfinance came into being from Bangladesh. So I'm saying that there have been various forces at play. What has happened in Bangladesh is not only poverty elevation at the at the cusps or at the intersections, which were more meaningful, and that's why they were more equitous. That I would say. Coming to, I think that's a short point which I would want to make. I think when it comes to corporates in India or corporate evangelists or corporate leaders coming around to elevate poverty, there are 2-3 things that definitely. I mean, there are different models are already in place within India, outside India. Models are already in place. The simplest one is charity, or being slightly more what you can say on a day-on-day basis, slightly more empowering, financially empowering to the poor community. There are organizations which have run last mile logistics programs or last mile reach programs with BOP. There are companies which have a preference for affirmative action kind of hiring. One company which continues to talk about that is Muthoot, that I can think of. They have a stated intent of hiring from economically disenfranchised lot. That's what they say. So you will find different models, and these are the direct intervention models. What I think we need is coming together of government, the people themselves, and the corporate leaders for building. But charities and these kind of things are point in time. What they do is they help here and now. So, for example, right now and pandemic, we do need those. In a pandemic situation, we need health. We need food security for people. We need personnel safety. Okay, so if people are contributing towards that program, I'm not finding a fault with that. That is required, because unless we get that, there won't be a tomorrow for many people. What is needed after that is repurposing the CSR programs. It is about enabling people with not only financial empowerment but with the skills to get into multiplier effect. For example, one very simple fix would be corporates and corporate leaders actually taking skill development very, very seriously. Uh, it is sad and I don't want to trivialize, the tragedy that is around us, is that, you don't, rather than giving somebody a fish, tell him how to fish. Uh, you know, uh, I know it it would come as slightly, moralistic or, with latitude, but that's a fact. I mean, you set up people for success. You provide, you invest into skill development. You harness the power of microfinancing. Repurpose your programs. Not about here and now. Not about environment management. Uh, I mean, again, one thing which I've seen is a lot of companies typically use CSR, the mandated CSR money for
Yeah.
environment management.
Yeah.
People around the
Tapan,
government.
if I can just try and tweak this a bit, right? So I get it. We'll get to the solutioning and what ideas there are. But I just want to
Right,
peel the onion a bit to say, why are we where we are? I think it's important to
right,
try
right.
and
My
do
apologies. Yeah,
a little bit of the post-mortem to say, these are 4 or 5 levels. If you can come to say, well, these are fundamentally what went wrong. And that
right,
potentially,
right, right.
well, those are levers to move. So one I caught really clearly what you said is approaches in the past have primarily been around charity, and that kind of works point in time, but doesn't create sustainable, structured, long-term changes. And some of the stuff that you talked about, which is really the stuff around the intersection and other thing that Bangladesh played with, right? So I understand our planning commissions, etc., or Niti Aayog playing with things, but think over it. I'm going to come back to you on this point. With your thoughts on what were some of the, I wouldn't call them mistakes, but things that we did which potentially haven't yielded to us. So what were some of the mistakes, if any, that you would point to why we are where we are?
Uh, Thanks, Udmesh. The one thing that has been playing on our mind is how unequal the development has been, in this very complex country. If you see education, if you see industry, if you see any kind of development that takes place, I think it is always the urban areas that have dominated the mind space of politicians, of policymakers, of the who is who of corporate India. And there has been very scant attention paid to the rural hinterlands where we should have taken the development. We should have actually discouraged people from being rooted out. There should not have been need for migration. That is the root cause. I would really go there. I would say, why did the people start migrating? Because developments were not there. There were no employment opportunities there. So I think the root cause is that, and we need to address that.
That's a great.
All the corporate strategy, skill development, I think the magnitude way too large for us to help out in such small solutions. The fundamental aspect is to have equitable development stretching far into the hinterlands of India. That's what I think.
Great point. Great point. I think, as you say that, I think one thing that does worry me, right? I think, as with this whole
I can't hear Unmesh. Is it even?
I think Unmesh's network is just gone off, it
I
seems.
think you're,
Let's just give him a
yeah, even I could hear. Thank you.
Anyway, I think this has brought in whole lot of insights for us. Unmesh, are you live now?
oops. Can you guys hear me or am I gone?
Yes.
Yes,
Now
we can hear you.
Okay, I don't know what, but I can't see anything on the screen, but I'm just going to keep.
It's gone again, I think.
Unmesh, it might help if you keep the video off. Might help for a short while till the time.
Yeah, I think great point that you made. I think the thing that does worry me in this is the fact that we moved our factories on the outskirts of our cities, and the workers that you have in these factories are primarily farmers or farmers' children. And the worry I have is as the Internet of Things moves forward and MSMEs or other companies start to embrace IoT more,
yeah,
are the jobs at the bottom of the food chain that are going to be disrupted. So you potentially now have a situation where for a decade they haven't farmed because they were getting a monthly salary. And I genuinely worry that as we displace these workers, what is going to happen, because land is not tilled. They have lost the art, potentially a bit of farming, because they believe that that's too hard. So I'm going to come now to Shailendra, to you. Shailendra, what are some of the, so I think I like the points. One is our approaches traditionally have been around charity. Second, I picked up is we haven't done a great job of developing our rural and hinterland. And had we done that, we would have been able to control the tsunami of migration that we have seen. What are other things that we have kind of missed out on of why we are where we are today?
Okay, so a couple of things I think. So the points covered, I want to say I already covered. One which comes across is that the sense of the word called inclusiveness in organizations was, if I may say so, was fairly exposed. When I say inclusion is in terms of inclusion of the people at the grassroots level. The sense of empowerment comes from being inclusive in the organization. And that somewhere down the line was not practiced to a large extent. That was one of the mistakes I think a lot of organizations did. Wherein if you see the farmers, I have some friends who are farmers in Punjab, people who tilled their lands, some of them stayed back because they were treated like, extended part of the family. And that goes a long way in showing that human connect with your employees at the grassroots level does make them stay back. So I think so that was one error in judgment on our parts, or largely, that from a long time we did not had that sense of inclusion. And also another thing was, personally, if you see when you go to a wealth manager, he tells you that have a 6-month emergency fund for yourself just in case something happens. I think a lot of people did not foresee that in their businesses. When I say businesses, it would be larger or smaller ones, wherein the smaller scale people, if they had kind of envisioned that I need to keep 6 months of funds, the people at the grassroots would not have left so vulnerable in terms of a job. So because the first wave hit us, then things came back to a little normal. Now the second wave has hit us. So that is, I think, one of the other things that we missed the bus on in terms of financial planning for the organizations.
Fair. Thank you for that. I'm going to come, Rajendra, to you, and Darpan, then we'll close this loop on this one. Any comments that you have on structurally what potentially have been missed out? So Rajendra, thoughts from you?
Thanks, Ulmesh. I was actually doing one interview earlier, so I had to switch on, switch off. So up to now I'm free. So I think the good to hear the views from the colleagues around on the panel. My view, in fact, just to look at it from the organization's perspective, where I'm coming from at this point in time in Blue Dart, and I must say that we are blessed that we have deep pockets, because we are Blue Dart and we are also part of DHL as a group, right? So we've made sure that we kind of communicated to employees. We have 20,000 our own, 30,000 outsourced, correct, to the contractors. Made sure that while of course there was a migration, as my colleague just said, but very quickly, because they were stopped, because we actually provided a lot of assurances in terms of not only 100% salary, but we also provided appreciation bonus in about 3-4 months time of the first lockdown.
So Raj, I'm going to come to those elements. The thing that I'm really trying to still deliberate over is what has happened over the last X many years of why we are where we are, where the bottom is still struggling.
Yeah. So I'm actually coming to that by giving this current example, because just to kind of have a kind of, because I personally believe that there is a, connect, correct? It's a vicious cycle. So this example tells you that if you really proactively handhold, as some of my colleagues have said, right? Then, there is a mind which actually works towards, correct? They believe in you. Otherwise, why would somebody say, move out, correct? For example, I have this habit of, moving from my corporate life to personal life, as many of you have. I would say I have a small, let's say, each in terms of, farming and farmhouses and stuff like that. So I will quickly realize, Mesh, that if you ask that employee, the caretaker and his family, and of course there are a few of them, to just work for, salary, which, honestly, I think what you actually pay them, correct? Then it won't work. In fact, they will just, look for it as a need till the time they can, and they are not completely in, correct? So what model let's say we've tested for last about 5 years now, saying that, okay, I mean, you have this 9 acres of, land, and of course, a lot of things coming up there. So you have a variable model saying that, you increase the crop and then you, kind of take the cut out of it in terms of, let's say profits, correct? Now I'll tell you, these guys, now I must tell you, last about 5 years time, one of my caretakers family has their own, let's say 3-4 rooms, which they give it on a rent. They have a couple of vehicles. And my other, farmhouse guy, actually, he's got a couple of, let's say, guntas of land. Now, this is one small example. Of course, we can't change the entire world, correct? So if you look at the mindset of these poor people, this actually they are looking for some help and proactiveness in terms of how do they actually, have next 6 months kind of, think for the rainy days, correct, as somebody said. I think this is some example that I'm giving that this is possible, provided we are a vast country. We still have 65% people below, poverty line. So how do we do it, correct? So that's the proactiveness by the, kind of politicians, organizations, and stuff like that. How to bring in this model. In organization, we are trying, by the way, in fact, in Blue Dart, we're trying the variable model so that everybody become entrepreneur. Sure. It's difficult, but we're trying that. That's the background that I'm trying to get.
Fair. Darpan,
yeah, so 2 quick points, Unmesh. Hello. Can others hear me?
Yes, we can hear it.
Okay. So 2 quick points. One, which Rajendra also inferred, I think one is at a macro level, India's inability to work out a social security program. That is, and other than maybe PDS, we don't have any equivalent, and maybe some bit of EIS, etc. We don't have a consolidated, comprehensive kind of a social security program. And I do know that it takes some doing, it takes some kind of willpower on account of, so that is the larger picture. At a shorter corporate level also, I would say that, the gap between stated intent and the demonstrated intent is vast. And let me tell you a thing from pre-pandemic time. And I'm sure many of you would recall that. In 2009, Supreme Court came out with a judgment whereby, for people who were drawing less than 15,000 rupees of salaries, the calculation of, basic had to be done in a different manner, whereby the PF amount would have gone up. Now, at a very rudimentary back of the envelope estimate, this may mean 2 to 3% salary increase for people who were, or salary change for people who were at about 15,000 kind of salary levels. And at a corporate level, it might be even less than 1%. The amount of consternation, the amount of discussions around that, which I saw in finance forums, business forums, I'm on various social media groups, which are professional groups. I think the amount of shock, outrage from the corporate equivalents was phenomenal. And that is where the difference between stated intent and demonstrated intent comes in. We can say that, we want to do good. We can say that we are a company that, or people that believes into, doing good. But when it comes down to, putting your money where your mouth is, and I'm talking about pre-pandemic times. I know that economy was a bit of stretch at that point in time also. And the economic truth is that in times of crisis, consolidation of financial power happens, whether you like it or not. So rich gets rich, the people who are rich, they get richer, and people who are poor, they get poorer to any kind of crisis. So it only aggravates that, consolidation. But that part, I would say that, somewhere we also need to soul search what we say, and what we mean.
Sure. So I think just to move the dial forward now, I think they're coming back to you on this one. It's really around, so the one thing we saw really about the migrant crisis, if you be, is the worker safety, worker health, worker care really. And what do you believe? I think does the welfare and empowerment of the bottom of the food chain, is it something that you believe should be and is part of corporate social responsibility?
The question is to me, Unmesh?
Yes, Vidya. Is it corporate responsibility? Because I think what we experienced in wave 1 and a little bit in wave 2 again, that, I mean, as soon as things go haywire, businesses shut down, the owners, founders kind of just put up their hands to say, well, we are struggling. We can't take care of people. People had to fend for themselves, rather be Atmanirbhar to an extent, to figure out what they can do for themselves, right? do you believe it's corporate responsibility? And I think the connected thread, what I want everybody to talk about is saying, therefore, what should be some measures that should be taken around it? So, Vidya, over to you.
Well, the short answer is yes, Unmesh, that it is the corporate responsibility. Not only just the corporate, I think society as a large, though India is seen as having its heart in the right place, I think internally we have failed our own society. So it is not only the corporate responsibility, I think society at large. Having said that, when the pandemic started and people really went in panic, I think if they had just given some 2-3 days of time, there would be a lot of help pouring in. I still wonder, maybe people really panicked too quickly and they just started moving out. But as you see, immediately after that, help did start pouring in. But then most of the migrants were already on the roads where people could not be reached. So I thought that there was this very panic reaction that also added to the whole scale of problems. However, coming back to your very pointed question, I think yes, it is corporate responsibility, and I don't think it should be mandated by the government that a company needs to do something, that they need to set aside 2% of the net profit, etc. I think it has to be an innate responsibility driven by your own sense of responsibility rather than mandated by the government. Only then I think we will be able to do justice to the society at large. That's my short answer.
No, I think interesting point, because look, I think what we caught off is when wave one kind of faded away somewhere August, September, October, when manufacturing had to start up again, including the large farmers in Punjab, right? Because they depend so heavily on migrant workers. There were cases where we know that people were put onto flights, right, and brought back. There were buses specially designed for bringing back workers back from Bihar and other places into Punjab to support some of the harvesting season. And then creating kind of quarantine centers. So now I see around me, there is reality sector still work is happening, but knowing very well that they've created a kind of a bubble where they're taking care of medical, food, everything for people. And I know that that's exactly what industries and manufacturing in wave two have learned from wave one, right? But what are some things, and I'm coming to you, Rajendra, to you, right? What are some of the things that you believe, um, is it a responsibility of the corporate, or do you believe we need to throw our hands up and let the state worry about it? And therefore, what are actions that you've seen, tangible actions that you've experienced corporates play around this, learning from wave one into wave two, and what potentially may shift going forward with this?
Yeah. So, Unmesh, I think good question. So, I would, resonate with what Vidya has said. But I will add one more thing, because ultimately we are all human beings in the corporates, correct? Let's not forget that. As a depending on which organization that you work for example, I can again, because examples are giving you the proof as to what we are saying. Say DPDHL, Blue Dart, from wave one to wave two, because we've really done well as well, because we are also a kind of logistic company. But within that, in fact, we made sure that our employees and their families are taken care of, not only by words of mouth or just kind of words, but 3 months appreciation bonus of 300 euros across the world, including India, by the way, though we were not incurring losses here. So it is a corporate responsibility. But what happens in a world like ours, of course, in a country like ours, that unless you have, depending on current situation, because philosophically, I would go with what Vidya is saying, but will it really happen? So here and now, people would look at their numbers, correct, and the balance sheet at the end of the year, correct. Then, if there is no, let's say, a kind of method or diktat, I would say, in terms of 2% of your last year's average net profit. I was, because the CSR had excellence said in, let's say, HDFC Life as well. When this rule started, what I think India was getting about 3,500 crores. Next year, when this rule was actually really supposed to be executed and implemented, it was 22,000 crores in 2017. Now 16 I was talking about, correct? Now 2021, I think it is 40,000 crores if you really calculate this amount of the established corporates, correct? Now, if this 40,000 crores, which is available, spent correctly with the willpowers, I think you will solve a little bit of a problem, correct? But again, if you leave it to the philosophical few, there are only few people who actually, as Vidya is rightly saying, that should be the innate kind of, urge, correct? It doesn't happen. So I would actually then say, I think for a country like India, it should be a mix till the time you get that, real ideal situation. I don't know how, when, correct? That you should have the combination of a rule plus the philosophical, minds that work together. I think that will take out this country, out of this to an extent, slowly but sure. And I think pandemic has made people, learn and believe that life is precious, not only mine, but people around me. I think this is the right time to bring in that more and more by virtual, let's say talking or getting into there. In fact, people are saying, boss, what will I do with my wealth, which is just numbers in account? If I don't have peaceful sleep because my nearby my neighbors are suffering, correct? And there is a kind of lowness in the climate, correct? I think that's the right time today that we should bring in this combination and move and surge ahead to get this bottom of the pyramid up a little bit every year. No, that's what I'm feeling. Yeah,
I think great point, and I think I'm going to come Darpan to you. I think my seeds are sowed in by virtue of learning really in Mumbai, and I grew up in the heart of Mumbai, which really is the what is called as the mill land, if you be right now. Nothing of that really is there. All you have is fancy towers, but a lot of these mill land was really mills and workforce housing, or what is now known as Mumbai, traditionally known as Mumbai Chawls, right, which were around it, which was really built by the owners of those mills to be able to take care of workers and their families who are in and around. And of course, then uh, things happened and the mills kind of faded away. And therefore, but if you even look at some of the big traditional conglomerate houses, whether the Tatas or the Raymonds of the likes and others that I've experienced on the outskirts of Mumbai, they always had this spirit of, oh, we have a factory and we need to build a community around it, whether it's the Jamshedpur example or the others that have done it, right? I think there are learnings, right? That when corporate India takes responsibility for things around them, then the chances are that it's a little bit more sustainable. But if you say that, well, I'm going to care as far as the worker comes into work and that's pretty much it, I'm going to put as much money into their hands, pressures and other things do not allow that sustainable change to happen, in my belief. But coming to you, I think with Hero, and what are some examples that you guys have played with around trying to create some sustainable change that can really help elevate the lives of folks at the bottom of the pyramid?
See, unfortunately, I'll not be in a great position to comment on the CSR programs and the efficacy of those. I'm 4 weeks into Hero. But the sheer fact that as of now, right now we are keeping status quo in terms of, just keeping the workforce, where that itself is a big step, because that's where the charity begins at home. I mean, you can't go and shout about, community programs if, you are laying off your poor employees.
Workers, yeah.
So that's the first thing. Okay. Now, I couldn't help but think of one, irony, or, about the word bottom of pyramid. I'm slightly going off topic, but the word, the phrase bottom of pyramid, or what now more politically correctly is called base of pyramid, that came into vogue not as a responsibility for corporates but an opportunity for corporates.
Yeah.
Right? Let's be very clear on that. Now, interesting thing, and we have seen this. I mean, anybody who has lived through 90s, the economic liberalization of India, the opening up of economy, after the benefits of that, trickle down benefits of that, anybody who has lived through that cycle, we are lucky that we have lived in such a time that we have seen, times of scarcity, then we have seen times of abundance and growth, and now we are seeing different kind of challenges. As a society, as a nation, we need to go quite long, but we are lucky. So one cannot deny. I mean, there is empirical evidence or anecdotal evidence available that economy benefits all when economic growth happens. So the question on whether corporates have a responsibility or not, I would say that it's not a responsibility; it's an opportunity. In their own limited way. I mean, it's just doing a trade-off between short-term and long-term. You can be short-term. You can do not spend money right now. You can spend money right now. You can lay off people right now. You can retain people right now. Or it's about being slightly long-term in terms of your intent and your programs.
Unmesh, if I can just bring a rejoinder to the responsibility
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Versus the opportunity.
Opportunity, yeah.
Yeah, I doubt that any country or any corporate leader would have looked at the pyramid if it was not termed opportunity. If it was termed responsibility, I doubt that anybody would have looked at that pyramid.
Precisely.
No, I think it's a great point, but I think the rejoinder to that, or the attack to that, is also the fact that, I mean, in a founder-led thing, it is easy, right? Because the founder is there. He or she's creating an institution for times to come, right? But most CEOs have a tenure of 3 to 5 years, right? And they're getting their ass kicked by the board. And we know growth is the primary lever that you have to show. And therefore there is pressure. So therefore this whole short-term, long-term thing kind of is sacrifice in the process. You tend to take decisions in the short term. And I've been guilty of being part of that, right? I mean, I know that we had to evaluate saying when can we course correct our workforce, because we are not going to see the growth that we are, right? So I think those are real challenges. Coming to you, Shailendra, I think if you can talk about what you have seen as good experiments or good experiences of organizations putting in things in place to be able to support the bottom of the organization, or empowering some of these people.
All right. So I think a lot of organizations going back to the blackboard in terms of re-strategizing, and they have realized the value of the grassroots level employees, and to get them into that sense of ownership of organization. So I'll talk about skill building, or let's say learning and development. Earlier, people were paying a lot of top dollar for your high pots or high potentials at the top of the pyramid. But now that inversion is taking place, wherein people are or organizations are thinking or re-strategizing that we need to kind of focus more on skill development and learning of a grassroots level, so that, like Darpan had mentioned, teach them how to fish better instead of just teaching them how to fish. So in terms of learning and development, that's what a lot of people are doing, is inventing the pyramid altogether by focusing more on the skill and learning of people at the pyramid, because in the longer run, that's what might take us if another pandemic hits us, because people would be more qualified to get you more results. Because ultimately, we like it or not, our frontline workers get us most of the revenue, especially in airlines. If you look at it, we are going through a very, very tough time. It's all about survival. And one of the things what most of the airlines have done, which might sound cliche, they haven't fired anybody. I mean, it's very difficult to pay people with depleted finances. But one confidence that the frontline employee is getting, that here, I still have a job. People might be getting paid by the hours instead of what they were paying. But that sense of security, or maintaining that safety need, that when the things get better, I'm still in the mix of things. So laying off people and re-strategizing how much of money goes into sustenance of all the employees, and the focus being the frontliners or the grassroots level, is something I think is going really well for the aviation sector and the other industry that I speak of.
Yeah, I think just connected with that, right? I think I understand that the pandemic kind of has accelerated the whole digitization and digitalization of the work, of not the workforce, but work in general, right? I think organizations that have been on the IoT journey in the manufacturing side and the digital journey have kind of been able to pivot faster and stay agile to the market. Others who haven't are struggling. And the worry I have is, pandemic or no pandemic, as you move forward, the pandemic has kind of tested and proven the fact that humans are biohazards. And selfishly, again, the short-term, long-term trade-off that will be made, organizations will want to invest into IoT and other things. And that's where I think my worry is, the next wave or tsunami of unemployment will come in, because people that do not have skills that are fungible to translate into new age skill sets will suddenly get thrown off. The sense of inclusion or exclusion because of technology coming in. And I'm hoping that there is an aggressive focus on reskilling of people within the organization. I think we have talked about slightly in forums, but I don't think it's something it's become it's become the reason of existence for most companies. And I worry for that, because that will create a further divide. And compounded with that, of course, is the ability to drive public opinion using social media today, right? I mean, the haves and have-nots, if that's going to widen, we potentially are going to experience a little bit of what the Arab world is experiencing, or people on the street all the time. But I would just want to fast forward this now and to really think about the last thread on this. So we talked about the responsibility of corporates in being able to enable this group. But what do you see is the role of state or the fourth sector, or primarily if you talk about the NGOs and other not-for-profits, in being able to be able to create a sustainable structure to support and empower some of the folks that we are talking about? Any thoughts? I don't know. I want to first potentially, Shailendra, if you have some thoughts, we open up with you this time.
Could you just, I think I missed your question.
Sorry. The question is, what do you think is the enabling role of the state or the non-for-profits in being able to create a sustainable structure going forward? So we talked about what the corporates can do. We talked about saying intersection of CSR, learning, all of those things we talked about. But what can the state do, i.e. from a policy perspective or support perspective, or what can the not-for-profits do to be able to create this thing?
I think this can be linked back to the last question that you asked, in terms of who's responsible, or whose responsibility is it, and who takes what onus. So I think, in my opinion, the state right now, or the policies of the state or the NGOs, should be focusing more upon saving lives. The sustaining lives, the responsibility could be taken up by the organizations or the CSR initiatives or the skill building that they have. We should leave the major responsibility to save lives and go through this on the state. The policy should be towards health and infrastructure more right now. And the organization should kind of shoulder the burden of sustaining the people in terms of their employment and their salaries. So that's what comes to my mind.
Got it. With the coming to you, right? I forget what it was called. Rajendra, there used to be a role in personal relations, right? Welfare officer, right? There was a role of the welfare officer.
Welfare officer registered with the government.
Right. I have moved far away from the world of manufacturing, primarily last couple of decades, not being close to that. But there is a time again that the state needs to enforce that if you are a business of this scale and size and these many people, then this is a threshold of health, well-being kind of stuff that needs to happen. And there cannot be any relenting on that, right? I mean, and talk about that, because I'm coming from a more policies and regulatory perspective. And then, of course, the not-for-profits, what role they can play.
Certainly, there is no going away from the fact that health and safety needs to be at the center of the organization. Of course, the situation has made us aware of it. 2 years back, we did not even know who was heading the health and safety in Rambol, because it was not at all important.
It wasn't.
But now that same person is heading the task force, and everyone, he's the first port of call. Everybody knows him. So everything centers around health and safety of the worker. If you're healthy, if you're safe, there is business. If you're not, there's no business. That is the bottom line. There's no questioning that there has to be this welfare officer, or we call it health and safety lead. Absolutely, it must be there. And secondly, I think whenever we have these webinars or forums, etc., somehow the solutions veer around short-term solutions. But if we want the state to be pushed into something, that has to be very long-term. Yeah. I keep going back to that. There should not be any need for people to reroute themselves and come to another city where they are aliens. They are guest workers. They do not have roots. They do not have a political constituency. So absolutely, there must be such kind of environment, a development where people should never feel the need to go to urban centers. As it is, Indian cities are nothing to be spoken about. And if you go on attracting people more and more for menial jobs, I think it is completely a skewed way of looking at development. So I go back to my my thinking that the government should come in. Certainly, there is a very large role for them. They cannot just leave it to the society or the corporates. It is the government who can be the prime mover, because the magnitude of the problem is so much. No corporate or no society can be able to do it without the government stepping in, having those policies. And when I say equitable development in all the, geographically as well as economically and societally, more and more focus towards making agriculture as something attractive. There is so much scope for organic agriculture, horticulture, floriculture, cottage industries, handicraft, small scale industries. They need not come to your urban cities at all. In fact, they can be magnets for a lot of urban youth now who want to go to farming, lot of a green way of living, etc. So why should we not fundamentally change our thinking? I think India is too large a country to just be fed on short-term solutions. It will not work.
No, I think very valid point, right? I pride myself to be a son of a farmer. I think we're just 2 generations now that we are in the city, but I still own land, and and that's something that I propagate, right? I think everybody who I believe has tillable land, we have a responsibility to ensure that that land is tilled, because by doing that, we have exposure, we have potentially some money at our disposal, we have information at our disposal, and we can carry that back to where our roots are and be able to create employment opportunities, create innovation opportunities, and things like you talked about, right? Which is about innovative farming, intelligent farming. And I think you become a role model for the farmers around. I think the challenge in India primarily is because we don't have, unlike what we have a little bit in the north of India, we have large farmers, right? Farmers who own tracts and tracts of land. We have farmers, average farmers potentially own 3-5 acres on most parts of India. And that becomes very difficult to sustain. And because everything then is dependent upon the rain god. But coming to Darpan, to you, I think what do you see as a role structurally for the state, and how can the not-for-profits play a role in helping here?
So I think let me try and take a stab at why this is not happening so far. I think there is some bit of lack of confidence between each other. Okay, why are average citizens or average corporates worried about paying taxes or contributing to government schemes or government interfering into their business? Is because the confidence of their dollar and their money being used rightly is slightly low, and we have seen that. Again, I'm saying, I mean, if you look around, if you look at the poverty alleviation programs of government, on paper everything is there. On paper, we need to do incrementally just to make it come alive. But the fact is that even after 20, 30, 40 years, they simply have not taken off. And so there is a truth to that. There is a compelling truth to why that confidence is also not there. Likewise for NGOs. Now, I'm not talking about complete surrender, but I think somewhere it has to start with a bit of confidence building, which has to come with better governance, transparency, intent sharing, and so on and so forth. And again, this won't happen overnight. Moving on from there to collaboration, because there is a space for policymakers. I would not just just say that policymakers are undesired in a growing country like India. There is a room for corporates. There is a room for NGOs also, and they have to work in collaboration, as well as having a healthy debate and argument with each other on what is right, what is not. Because NGOs, so they are all bound by their own charters. Okay, but this confidence building, move from this confidence building to collaboration has to happen, and there is a space for all of them. They all have defined roles. They all can contribute to that. No argument on that. The only thing is that ideally it should not be prescriptive, because that's where the collaboration starts dropping off. But in the initial years, unfortunately, I mean, you might have to enforce a few of these things as a policy or as a behavior.
Sure. Rajendra, any comments on the similar thread before I start pulling this together?
So, Unmesh, I always believe, that we are in the current ecosystem, whether we like it or no, whether it's, public, private, political stability, instability, forces, anti-forces, correct? We are part of it, correct? And it's not going to get changed, let's say, quickly. We all know about it, correct? Particularly such a large country, democracy and stuff like that. So within this, current ecosystem where we are in, how do we find a solution? So my personal belief, and I very strongly believe that just depending on the state or the government is not going to happen. And also, having rules for corporates to have just CSR spend is also not going to happen. I think pandemic last about 13 months have taught us a good lesson that public-private partnerships, wherever it is, in fact, if good old days in HR and of course in management, we used to talk about gain sharing, correct?
Yeah.
Now the gain sharing was when you do well, do you really share with your employees, correct? And that talks about the intent and the Tatas and of course those names, that you mentioned. They're all with that intent, correct? From the top of the pyramid. It's not about the bottom of the pyramid. If the top of the pyramid has this intent, when you're doing well, of course, I understand, when you're not doing well, you also have that confidence of proactively communicating with the employees at the bottom of the pyramid. They understand, provided you are actually, having that kind of, philosophical mind and heart to let employees believe in you, correct? So I think I personally and strongly believe that in the current ecosystem that we are all living in, it's not going to be a, kind of silver bullet to change things in, maybe few months or few years. I think public-private partnership and last 18 months have really given that impetus. I think we should look for that and go positively with it.
Great point, Rajendra. Thank you very much. I think it's been a great discussion. So thank you very much to each one of you for offering what your thoughts on this are. I think if I were to try and pull this together, I think I resonate with all your thoughts. And I think the first and foremost, I think the coming out, reminiscing the license Raj and the constant doubt, if any, between the state and the corporates. I think that seed somewhere has sowed there, where corporates want the state to be as far as possible so that you don't end up giving too much information and let the state intervene. But I think the time has come for an active, like Rajendra said, public-private partnership. And history shows us where privates have really taken responsibility for community around them. There has been, and I think Jamshedpur still continues to be, or I'm hoping that stuff around Reliance and some of the other manufacturing hubs are classic examples where the privates have taken responsibility of their people and the community around. It becomes a bit more sustained and sustainable. I think the corporates have a responsibility towards their employees, especially people that are bottom of the pyramid. Our CEO salaries as ratios to average employees, the gap continues to widen. It's worrisome, but again, on the other side, you have to pay a high cost the salaries to be able to retain and create the transformational changes. But I think somewhere we have to balance the short-term aspirations that we have to long-term gains that the company should gain, and B, what society will really experience this has to be. I think the element around skill building is important, and coming from both perspectives. I think skill building from a CSR standpoint, right? Where are you putting your dollars just in creating food for people, or are you creating an opportunity for people to teach them to fish so that they have the skills to be able to sustain them for themselves? Now, are those skills going to be skills barely to sustain, or skills that will allow them to thrive? And that connects to the other thread that I've been talking about, is the fear I have with IoT and other stuff becoming more pervasive into our lives. Do we have the skills? And with the young population that we have today in our working population, do we have the skills to be able to pivot that? Because if we don't, then we're creating further social problems as you move. And I think that connects to the thread that we talk about, is really inclusive development. And the more we can do to create hubs within our different states, or hubs within villages. And I had an opportunity to go to Walmart in Bentonville. Bentonville is like a village. I mean, I come from a village, so I know what a village feels like. And when I was talking to the Walmart guys, and they were so apologetic, right, about, it's very difficult life here for people who come from big cities. And I was looking and saying, it looks very fancy though, but yes. But I think but just understand that entire village thrives on two companies that are there. And we need to have more such examples of being able to take our companies outside into our villages so that that entire economy around it starts to thrive. So I think those are some thoughts, but thank you very much. It has been very insightful for me on a Saturday morning. And I'm going to hand the baton back to Deepak and Hari. Over to you guys.
Ramesh, thank you so much. I think, I always say it's never easy to moderate a conversation on a digital platform, but you did an awesome job and you kept everybody really engaged. So thank you very much for doing that. And I think it was very, very clear. I think the corporate India, along with the government, has a role in economically empowering and improving the lives of workforce at the bottom of the pyramid. So I think fantastic conversation. And a quick 2 minutes to, I know you all guys are doing whatever for your companies, for yourself, for your surroundings. Maybe if I could ask each one of you, what is a new passion that you guys have picked up in this lockdown? Is there something interesting that you guys started doing? I can talk about myself. I've started enjoying playing chess with my son, and that's a new interest that I have picked up. What about you all? What all you guys are doing? Maybe Vidya, you would like to start?
Yeah, certainly. So in the first month when we started working from home, that was March 2020, we thought we will go back to the office within 2-3 weeks. It is just a short-term thing. But then it dawned upon us that it's going to be longish. Then we all thought, why don't we really put this some time that we save from commuting, etc. I live in JP Green's Greater Noida, and I commute to Gurgaon, where my office is. And it was a big time saving for me, not going up and down. We said, why don't we do something good about this time? So I had learned Sanskrit in my school days for 12 years, and I had left it far behind. And I always used to think that, such a rich language, such a scientifically devised language, everyone else in the world says you have this great legacy. And I said, why don't I go back and start learning? So I have all these books that I have started picking up again. And of course, the greatest teacher that we have, I'm going back to Bhagavad Gita for more and more learnings, more and more answers, a lot of introspection, and that is what is happening nowadays with me.
Fantastic. For me, Sanskrit has always been Ram, Rame, Ramo, and nothing. This is really fantastic. Unmesh, what's happening at your end?
So I think, look, I think the last wave one was crazy because I'm sure everybody in HR had their hands completely full. But I think I handed over the baton of my role in December, and I technically started garden leave, and therefore I've been engaged very much on a need to basis. But I think I've taken over as the homemaker since this calendar, and I now realize that I have a working wife, and I just realized that when I've practically been an absent father, absent husband almost, except for weekends. And then every day I came back late in the night or came over the weekend from my travels, I had this set of expectations of what the house should be and lose my thread because it isn't the way it is. And when you don't have, I stay in a complex with a lot of senior citizens. So we've been very, very tight about house help and all of those things. So I now have better appreciation for what our parents, our mothers or our wives go through. So I've been a homemaker to best degree, and I'm trying to do a decent job without grumbling about it. But that's what it is, rather than, of course, mentoring a few startups and things like that is what has really kept me busy. And I'm hoping that as COVID starts to fade away, I will look at what my next adventure will be, hopefully towards the end of the year.
That's fantastic, Nmesh. So I also do something, so I follow my mopping robot when it goes around the house, and I tell you, I've done some work in terms of mopping and sweeping the house.
Yeah, just so you know, I had the responsibility of vessels, utensils, mopping, and all of that. So I brought in Roomba in because I said we need technology to assist us, but she does the dry stuff, right? My wife needs the wet stuff, at least at a periodicity in the week. So yeah, so that's what my responsibility is.
Fantastic. Darpan, are you cycling or what's happening?
Not cycling. So two things. I would say, if I were to look at last 14, 16 months, One is that I have always I've been into fitness for a long period. I mean, I'm an avid gym buff. I mean, I'm a gym enthusiast. Most people want to use term gym freak, but not a freak. But I think learning to exercise at home and popping a six pack at this age was something which I consider to be, a decent achievement. Uh, because I was not able to get that in a gym. So that's something which I am particularly happy about, and I've been able to maintain it for long. The second thing, again, quite interested into food and the science and the anthropology and the history of food. So that's where bulk of my knowledge building has been. I've been reading a lot about food, and also not a regular but a weekend kind of a cook. I won't say chef. I mean, that would be insult, but I think these are two things which I have been, which are stress busters.
This is fantastic, Darpan. Six packs. I think this is awesome. This needs applause for this. This is fantastic.
I can see Rajendra has almost a quasi gym on the back.
Rajendra, we're not going to ask you to do your chin-ups out there, yeah. But
no. Yeah. But I think similar to what Unmesh said, of course, except that I'm, still full-time job. If you probably know, of course, you know it. 40 years into work, maybe formally, next couple of months in terms of the, formal retirement, but I'm not going to retire. But what this, 13, 14 months have really given us the time, as Unmesh rightly said, 4 of us, in fact, now, of course, 5 of us, because my son-in-law and my daughter is in US, because just before the last lockdown, their marriage was, and of course, we had a beautiful, marriage ceremony across Mumbai, Thane, and of course, in Konkan as well, destination wedding. But after that, it's all locked down. But I think what we realized, 3 of us now, back home here, me, my son, and my wife, I think the family time, correct? And of course, as you get busy on the screen here like this, almost for 10, 12 hours, what we kind of, particularly in the second lockdown, we said, no, let's have a schedule, correct? So morning with 3 of us, in fact, we do yoga. My son was not into yoga. He was actually in exercise. He still does that. But I think we do yoga because I'm a kind of, again, a fitness freak, in terms of the marathoner. I run for 25 years and, half marathon about 15 years and all that. So we continue to do that. Of course, that helped us, fingers crossed. I think we are still doing well, all of us. And I think that's the time, and of course we're all enjoying this quality times, a lot of conversation, because my son is now, he was in Accenture for a couple of years now, pursuing his MBA now from this semester. So I think this family time, morning yoga, evening meditation, by the way, Rama Raksha is something I got into. It's not so to say superstitious, but I think I've realized the scientific benefits of it in terms of getting the aura out of you, and of course, spreading those positivity. I think really helped, and it's amazing. My wife put me into that, and all 3 of us are doing it morning, evening, and of course in the middle of the day. I think the whole work. So it's different. I think we never have thought of this otherwise.
Great. And Shailendra?
Well, I'm doing a lot many things, so nothing worthwhile. But I think so. What I'm doing is what I engage my teams, because and doing a lot of philanthropy. We got a group, we arranging beds, we're doing some cremations, which has taught me a level of new level of empathy, which I think so was there, but wasn't there in practice. At the home front, I'm doing like what everybody is doing. Like I'm trying to cook. So I made hummus. My wife corrected me. She said it's hummus. And I told her that what I'll cook will come out to be hummus, not hummus. So you better be prepared for it. So that's the cooking part. I'm trying to figure out how the rich are becoming richer. So I'm trying to understand the trading piece of the market. So I kind of enrolled myself doing that. But yeah, I'm doing a lot of things which are quick wins, and that kind of keeps my motivation levels high when you keep on getting these news. You'll be surprised. The messages now, if you write on WhatsApp, you write deepest, the next word automatically comes is as condolences. There's so many which has gone far. So, and they say that before preaching, you should practice it yourself. So I'm practicing, trying to be sane, happy, doing small little things which give me quick wins. Trying to cook. I'm trying to figure out how different single malts are so expensive and how they taste different, but I've not been able to figure out. I think so. My Punjabi genes don't give me that kind of a taste bud, which make me understand the difference between a smoked peat and a fruity flavor. So yeah, I mean, just trying to keep happy. That's about it. And try to keep.
Fantastic. Now, I'm going to ask you offline, where are you procuring your liquors? That's very important these times. Yeah. So,
See, like I said, somebody had said about being proactive. So we always, it's always good to keep a stock at home.
No,
and one for the rainy day always.
Absolutely. So Vidya, gentlemen, thank you very much. I think it was a fantastic conversation on a Saturday morning, and keep safe, keep healthy. And we're going to see you all again on another conversation very, very soon. So thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
It was a great
Thank
learning.
you.
It was a great learning, Umesh, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.